All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred here with Joe Courtney. How's it going, dude?
Morning, Jerred.
All right, well, we're going to get right into it. So today we're talking about the top 3 ways to avoid injury in the garage gym. Okay, so if you are a garage gym athlete, you could be training anywhere. We've seen a lot of it. We've worked with a lot of athletes and clients, so that's what you can expect today. How do we avoid these injuries in the garage gym that they're just a part of training? Like I think Mark Ripito says, like it's like part of what we get for not sitting on our ass for our whole life. You don't have to look at injuries as like this horrible thing. Like we don't want any debilitating injuries, but they do come because we're not all perfect. We can't have perfect form every single time. Our egos get in the way, all this kind of stuff. So let's dive into it. And the first one that we're going to go over is the problem is the program. And so what that means is, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, Joe, but when a problem comes up in training, that becomes the program. It doesn't mean you have to go off of the program that you're currently following, but the wrong approach and mental side of this is some people think you need to grind through it, or you just push through the pain, take some ibuprofen, but stick to the program, because sticking to the program is the most important thing. And it's not. The problem becomes a program because you don't want this acute injury to become some sort of chronic injury. So you need to start diverting a lot of your attention and focus to something when it comes up. So if you have a nagging low back pain, your body's telling you something. If you don't make adjustments, nagging is going to become long-term nagging, going to chronic from acute, and you're going to be in a lot bigger trouble then. What do you think about just kind of the idea of the problem becoming the program?
Yeah, and to be honest, it's not even just like the program in a vacuum. It's you plus the program, because a program for one person might be completely fine. The entire load might be fine. But if you're getting into it and the load is way too much than what you can handle, or if you're doing something, a lot of jumping or powerful thing, and you're still recovering from an injury, it's going to be fine for most athletes, but it not be fine for you. So the program plus you is how you fit with the program, because not everything is going, unless you're like one-on-one working with somebody who's writing every single minute, every single day just for you. It's the meshing of you plus the program, and little adjustments here and there, like going off the jumping and the powerful part. If you can't jump for some reason, if you have some sort of like foot, ankle injuries, landing, jumping, something like that, don't just try and wrap your ankle up and do it because that's what the program says. Find something that's similar. Find some other sort of powerful hit movement that you can do that will basically translate to close to the same thing. But not every program is going to have every single little scenario and caveat for you.
Yeah, I'm in this fitness game for, we all know, daily over decades. That's kind of our slogan over here, and that's how I look at the fitness game for myself. And so if an injury's coming up, like I'm doing everything I can to stop it, because I'm not worried about exercise. I'm not worried about the next 12 weeks. I'm worried about the next 12 years, 20 years. I don't want to have a problem. So I start to focus on that. I just loading appropriately. I'll avoid an exercise if it's completely necessary, like put it in context. If something low back is just hurting me and it's maybe a specific activity, then I'm going to maybe avoid or adjust that activity and make sure that I'm then not just not doing things. That's not quite the solution. It's not like, okay, well, that hurts my lower back, I'll never do that again, which is what a lot of people do. It's I'm going to avoid that or load differently, which we'll talk about more in a minute. And then I'm also going to add something else into the program to fix, because most of the time fixing some sort of problem has to do, you have to do more work to fix it. It's not just the avoidance of something. It's the addition of strengthening the lower back or adding some sort of mobility. And you could be in any of these situations, but you want to address it right away. Now, the second thing to avoid injury is this focus on auto regulation and recovery. And Joe, I'm going to let you kick this one off for tip number 2. So what do you have to say about auto regulation and recovery?
Yeah, so this comes up somewhat in strength training a lot, because we'll either program certain parameters and people can't do the weights that we assign, the percentage that we assign to those parameters. So they always wonder, okay, do I do the weights? Do I do the parameters? Whatever. And you stick to the parameters, adjust the weight. And that is the auto regulation part. Sometimes you can do that with reps as well, especially if it's certain accessory work. You lower the reps to regulate what you can and can't do. And this could depend on either an injury, something that's nagging at you. So if you're trying to be explosive and things just aren't, firing right, then definitely lower that weight so that you can be explosive and not just push through, do this heavier weight, and you're not being explosive. You're just kind of lifting, and it still is kind of tough, but you got the weight that was programmed. It's better to execute the movement better and lower the weight, because you can always add weight and increase it later as long as you're executing it properly. And also, to me, auto regulation goes beyond the specific sets and reps and weight. It's the days of the week. And like there's times where if maybe you slept wrong and that's why your low back or hips are hurting you, and then the next day is squat day and you're like, well, my low back hurts because I slept bad, but it's squat day, so I have to squat today. Well, you don't. You should reorder your days. And I do probably once a month. I reorder my days. So typically, like we have Monday squat day, Wednesday's press day, and there's the other days I have other things programmed. But there's probably once a month where I'm moving squat day to later in the week because of some reason. Because squat's just such a big movement, and it matters so much about how my hips and low back feel, that I just have to reorder that and it's fine. Or if it comes down to time, I know press days, I can probably finish 10 minutes, an entire 10 minutes faster than I can on squat days. So reordering your days is a type of auto regulation that I think should be used as well. And like, if you're feeling a little bit of low back issues, and I know a lot of people have been dealing with this lately, it's either like, if you're training a lot and not doing mobility regularly, your hips are probably really tight, and your quads might even be really tight because your hips are tilted. That's an entire other thing. If that's the case, whenever I feel like that's happening to me, and I'm approaching a squat day, I'll push squat day a couple of days back, and I'll do some major hip mobility for the next couple of days. I notice it starts to free up, and then I can hit my squats and feel better. So having that little bit of auto regulation within your week, and within your sets, I think is it can make a big difference in the long run.
Yeah, and we just covered a study not that long ago on the podcast about auto regulation within strength training being a pretty like decent way to, just essentially listening to your body as opposed to always listening to like a how, like you're saying, what's programmed and I'm going to follow it without fail. Like auto regulation is just as effective as that, which you should take comfort in, that you can make these adjustments. And 100%, Joe says he does it on a monthly basis. I honestly probably do this on a weekly basis. Like I will, if I like had a poor night's sleep or something happened, or I just get like, I train a little bit later in the day, which has some cons. Because if you have a really, let's just say, mentally taxing day, and then I show up late afternoon to train, and I'm like, it's not that I'm not going to train, but I'm more concerned that I'm not going to be able to bring the level of, like, let's just say, when I say intensity, I don't mean high heart rate. I mean like focus, like this level of intensity and focus that I want. So I'm like, you know what? This workout, say it's interval training, would be better suited to a day where I'm a little bit more mentally fresh, and I can just take this other day and move it here. And so I do a lot of that on a weekly basis, and it's become a lot more lately. And I would move training in the morning almost eliminates that completely for me. But I'm working out with my brother at a time that works convenient for him. And so like, I'm just sticking to that time. But that's something that you got to keep in mind. You can make these adjustments, and then you just have to focus on recovery. That is, like, we call it the EO3 elements. If you're one of our athletes, you know what that is. You can Google it if you haven't. If you're unfamiliar, we have a lot of resources out there about it. But it's really just, making sure that your digestion's in place. You're focusing on your sleep, vitamin D through sunlight and hydration, all these things that really, they don't matter that much. Like if you started today, you're not going to be in this much better place in 48 hours. But if you compound that daily over decades, you're doing this for months on end, you're going to notice those nagging injuries go away when you're sleeping 8 or 9 hours and you're focusing on all the things that you should be. All of those kind of go away. And so I think between those, that kind of auto regulation recovery mindset, you'll be good to go. Now, the last one we already kind of hit on, we're kind of calling it like prehabilitation and loading, is because there are certain things that you should be doing if you feel like an injury is coming, or if you've had an injury in the past and you're wanting to make sure that you prevent one in the future. There are certain things that you should be doing. So Joe, I'll let you kick it off again, man. How should athletes think about adjusting load, or maybe throwing in some prehab stuff into their training?
So I kind of mentioned the mobility part before of making sure you're getting that mobility, and if you need to move your days around because that can make a big difference. But also part of that is making sure you're using like mobility could cause you if you're having certain mobility issues, it can cause you to use different muscles than you shouldn't be if you're getting out of position. And so then the prehabbing would be make sure you're isolating some of those muscles to use better. So on top of my hip mobility and quad opening that I do before I squat every day before I squat, I will always do some sort of isometric glute work and then like whether it's unilateral or just like hip bridges because I always know that I need to make sure my glutes are firing. And if I notice a difference if I don't do that specific glute work, and I've told one or two people about that, like, hey, if you're having hip issues or something like this, open up your hips, stretch your quads, and then isolate your glutes to make sure they're firing, and it makes a big deal. So that little bit of um, intentionally warming up the right muscles and just warming up in general makes it makes a big deal.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. I'll kind of focus more on the loading side of like making adjustments there. If you're not like, you can always just go down in weight. You know, that's one thing, but that's an appropriate adjustment. But what I'm talking about loading is putting load on a muscle through a range of motion, which we could just call a lift, we could call exercise. And to be honest, if you're not that experienced in this arena, you probably should be working with a physical therapist at some point, especially if the injury has gone past a certain point. And so don't take any of what we're saying as like medical advice or like exactly what you should do, because we're talking more about prevention. If you're already kind of in the injury bucket, like you should go see a physical therapist and work with one. But this is something that I think a lot of people, you know, going back to some of the things that I mentioned earlier, they don't realize. If you hurt your lower back, it is not the avoidance of exercise that fixes the lower back problem. And this is what a lot of people do. They just, and this is a decent mindset, right? You're like, okay, my lower back hurts when I do back squats. I'm going to either not do back squats or I'm going to significantly lower the load on back squats, continue the same program, then increase it when I feel better again. But you may have not fixed the root cause of that problem at all. Like Joe is kind of mentioning, there could be some sort of mobility issue. You could be, not firing a certain muscle group. You could have some sort of imbalance that you've developed over the years or whatever. But you are going to have to load this muscle most likely to strengthen and improve it. So like the lower back, maybe it's adding something like the additional sets of reverse hyper, which is a great exercise that we love. A lot of people don't have access to a reverse hyper, but if you can do back extensions or Supermans or something like that, higher rep, very low load, incredibly low load, higher rep deadlifts are a great way to do this. You can even do it with a kettlebell or a band. Ways to get blood into an area is going to be the main thing that you're wanting to do, because when a muscle group or area is injured, it needs blood flow. It needs the nourishment in and out. And so as much blood flow you can pump in and out of there, the better. And so I like to do that through movement itself. There are 1,000 other ways you can do this. I mean, that's the premise behind like contrast therapy between going hot and cold. It's supposed to like contract blood vessels and then expand and like push blood in and out of areas. And then there's also like these e-stim devices, right, that just like pulse the muscles, and all they're trying to do is like throw blood in and out. So you don't have to focus on it as much. But I really don't think any of those things, while they're cool and fun and maybe easier in some circumstances, are not going to be as good as controlled, loaded movement through a range of motion, being that is either guided through physical therapists or incredibly low loads. But you know when blood is being pumped into an area, like you can call it the pump or whatever, but you know when blood is getting in and out of an area appropriately. You just want to make sure that you have the right guidance in doing that, especially, like I said, if it's a full-blown injury. So that's kind of it. Did you have anything else?
Yeah, I also thought about a study that we went over, I think sometime last year or something, because I remember doing it as I did this as either prehab, but also a getting ready to max out. But there's a study went over where power lifters went through a cycle of, they would just, when they weren't, it was like a low load cycle, they would take a phase off to where all they would do is work up to like a heavy 1 rep, take that weight down to 70%, do 1 set, and then that was it. There wasn't like a lot of volume. There wasn't a huge training program. It was just work up to a 1 rep, go down to 70%. It wasn't like a true 1 rep max. It was just a heavy one, go down to 70%, do 1 set, and then that's it. You're done. And after that, the study they showed they still increased their strength with such a significant decrease in volume. So something like that, I think, is a load adjustment to where, like you're not going to detriment yourself gains wise, but it could give you the extra healing that you need, and the blood flow and the movement practice too.
Yeah, and adding any kind of deload to your program, like if you're following Garage Gym Athlete programming, we deload every 4th week, but we are trying to guide you through a deload. If you are dealing with an issue, feel free to take that week to, let's phrase it as, do whatever the hell you want. You know what I mean? Like, it's a deload week, and we have 3 hard weeks followed by this deload week, which we could argue, to be honest, that deload week is not easy most of the time. Like, and we're not trying to make it easy. We don't want to like have these throwaway weeks, but if you need that, like just like maybe a full week off, or just kind of just focusing on like, I just want to do like extended mobility sessions for the next 7 days with some zone 2 work, like go for it. That's going to be much better than most anything else. But those are the top 3 things. So making the programming, just focusing on that, auto regulation and recovery, paying attention to your body, what it's saying, and focusing on those recovery metrics every single day. And then, appropriately hitting your mobility, prehabilitation, and loading through range of movement, I think are all really important things if you want to stay injury free in the garage gym. But that's it. That's all we have for this one. If you're on the YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and leave us a comment and let us know how you like the content. We would really appreciate that. And if you are on your favorite podcast player, whether it's Apple, Spotify, whatever, please 5-star review, positive comment, really helps the show out, and we would really appreciate it. But that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching or listening. For listening to the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.